How do you target the right users when you're building and launching your no-code app? Here's the thing, you can have an amazing app idea or even an amazing app, but if you don't target the right users, or if the right users don't know it's for them, then it doesn't matter how great your app is. So how do you fix this? Because this is a problem you really don't want to have. You don't want to get to the other side of your development and then not have any users. Well, that's what we're going to break down today. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because, again, this is one of those things you really don't want to get wrong. Once you finish up your development of this first version of your app, you want to make sure you have users wanting to come on board. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding and with no technical background required. So we're going to go through this today, and I'm going to give you some different frameworks and outlines to help you think through how to not just solve this problem, but really prevent it from happening in the first place. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to jump over to the whiteboard here. Now, we have one of two scenarios that we're talking about and that we're really trying to avoid. You can have the right app, but the wrong market, right? Or you can have the right app and the wrong message. Neither of these are problems that you want to have, and they can seem like they're really different, but actually solving them or preventing them rather, it involves going through some of the same steps. So regardless of which problem you have or you might have, you're still going to want to go through these to make sure you come out on the other end with the right market and the right messaging for your app. So there are a few things that you want to start with, right? No matter which of these you're thinking about, you want to start by answering three specific things when it comes to your app. And we're getting really kind of grassroots here. We're getting down to the foundation of things because that's where you have to start and you have to build up from there. So we have to make sure this is all laid out and strong before you take next steps forward. So the first thing that you have to clearly identify and clearly understand how to explain is the problem you are trying to solve. You have to solve a problem with your app, some sort of a problem. Now, this can be confusing for some people because there are products and things in the world that are really successful. Lots of people use and buy them, but it might not seem like they solve a problem. But a problem can really be a number of different things. A problem can be related to money. It can be related to employment, financials, business, things like that. But it can also be related to things like entertainment or just basic convenience related things. So think about what problem your app is solving or what problem it will be solving before you go any further, and make sure that you can really clearly explain this. If you have to teach someone about a problem you think they have, then you need to work on it. This needs to be something that you can really quickly, in less than a sentence, describe to someone and have them nodding their head, yes, yes, I know what you're talking about. Okay. And then from there, you need to understand actually, I was going to say solution, but a better word for this is outcome. You need to understand the outcome that people are looking to achieve. Okay. Now, if they have a problem, that means they want to solve it, but they want to solve it so that they can achieve some certain outcome or benefit on the other side. So in reality, if you have the problem and the outcome and you know what those are, you know how to clearly talk about them and explain them, your app actually just goes right in the middle and it connects, or it kind of transforms one to the other, right? It takes the problem or the current reality or the before, and your app helps someone get to the other side. It helps them achieve that outcome. But in order to make sure you're marketing the right people and to make sure you're using the right message, you got to know how to talk about the before and about the after. Because people don't really care so much about the thing in between. Not really. They don't care about all the technical specifics. Those are important. But what's more important are the problem and the outcome and being able to speak to those. And then I like to add one onto this, and I call it the without. So, generally, when someone has a problem, they're looking to achieve an outcome, they want to achieve that outcome without having to do something, without having to spend too much money, without having to spend too much time, without having to do X, X, and X, right? This is especially true when your app is going to be providing some sort of process that a user already has an existing solution for. So maybe a user or your target market, maybe they're already using some sort of software to solve the problem that you're also solving. Or maybe they just use manual processes. Maybe they use spreadsheets. But what they want to do is achieve an outcome without having to do something. So if there is an existing solution, but it's just not as good as it could be, and you're building another solution, well, your solution should help enable them to achieve this outcome without having to do all of the frustrating or time consuming things that their current processes are requiring them to do, right? So if the processes are manual, well, your app might help them achieve the outcome they're looking for, but without having to employ a full-time assistant to handle these manual tasks. Or if they're using spreadsheets, well, your app might help them achieve the outcome without having to go in and update spreadsheets every single day at the end of their day, right? Things like that. So when you're able to clearly talk about the problem in the same way that your target market talks about it, and you know what the outcome is, and you're able to talk about that too, and you can help help your target market or your potential users avoid the things that they find frustrating or inconvenient, then you're starting to put together some really good messaging. This is where you can start having really impactful conversations about your app. Now, one thing to keep in mind with all of this is that this insight, all of the things that we've just talked about, this insight comes from market knowledge. So, if you don't know how to talk about the problem or the outcome or those withouts, then you need to start having more conversations with your market. You need to start learning more about them. You need to start studying them and getting to know them. Conversations are going to be best, but ideally, if you're building an app, you're solving a problem, you're providing the outcome, you have this market knowledge. And if you have this, and if you can explain these things, then it's hard to build an app that's just entirely for the wrong market altogether. And it's hard to get the messaging entirely wrong altogether. All right. Now, that's not to say that this is all you need. There's more to it, and it takes refining. But if you at least have this, it's hard to just get it completely wrong. Okay, so this is the foundation that you really want to start with. Make sure that you're having conversations with your target market. You're able to really easily and very quickly explain the problem, the outcome, all those frustrations. If you can do that, and especially if when doing that, when talking about these things, the people who would potentially be using or your app, if they're nodding their heads yes and they're saying, "Oh yeah, I totally get that," things like that, you're on the right path. That's a really good sign. Okay, so start with these. And then once you have that down, you really want to add another layer on top. So you may have heard this talked about before. I certainly didn't make this up, but your app, really any product, any service out there, it can be one of two things. It can be a vitamin or it can be a painkiller. Now, if you have those foundational components down and you have a pretty good idea because you've had conversations with your market, you're close to them, you know that your problem outcome and withouts are pretty much narrowed down. Now you add this layer on top and you figure out whether your app is going to be a vitamin or a painkiller. Now, if you think about this, a vitamin is something that kind of spurs growth. Okay. When you take vitamins not when you're sick. You take them when you're already well, but you want to stay healthy or you want to just improve your health even further. So when you think about vitamins, you're really looking for growth and gains, right? But when you think about a painkiller is something to take when you're trying to avoid, or you're trying to get out, rather. You're trying to get out of a problem that you have. You're trying to lessen the effects or the symptoms of something. So, really, a painkiller is more so focused on aversion to loss, right? You take a painkiller when you want to avoid losing something or avoid getting worse, right? That kind of thing. Think about your app or your app idea as it relates to these two things. Keep in mind the problem and the outcome that you're trying to transform users from the problem to the outcome, right? Keep those in mind and think about, is your app more of a vitamin or is it more of a painkiller? In reality, your app can actually be both. Okay. So, for example, let's say your app is for businesses and maybe it helps them increase their leads into their sales funnel. So, it's a marketing focused app and it brings them more potential customers. Your app could be a vitamin because a business can already be healthy and successful and still want to increase its customer lead. But it could also be a painkiller because maybe a business is struggling to get leads. And so your app is going to help them get out of that tough spot. But if you think about it, even though your app could be both of these, the features could be the exact same, right? Your app doesn't actually have to change in order for it to be one or the other. So it can be both. But the important thing to keep in mind is what your target market and your prospective users need. What do they want and need? If they are struggling to solve a problem, well, then you're going to want to talk about your app as being more of a painkiller. But if your target market is already doing okay in whatever it is that your app relates to, and they just want to get better or they want to improve in some way, well, then you're probably going to want to talk about your app as being the vitamin. Now, your messaging, the way you talk about your app or the way you write about your app, that can change over time. So, in reality, at one point, it could be more of a vitamin in the way you talk about it. At another point, it could be more of a painkiller. Think about how markets change, how industries change, how economies change. Sometimes solutions are painkillers, and sometimes just a month later, even a year later, those same solutions turn into vitamins just because of trends in the markets and things like that. But you have to know what your market needs. And once you do, then you can talk about your app correctly. And this is really important, again, because you want to make sure that the right users know without a doubt that your app is for them. So once you have these things ironed down, you have the problem, the outcome, the withouts, you know whether you want to talk about your app as being a vitamin or a painkiller, you need to do something very important, right? Don't forget this. You need to align your development. Okay. So when you're building the first version of your app, you need to make sure, let me zoom all the way out here. You need to make sure that you're really aligning your development. A really big problem that we see, which actually kind of adds to what we're talking about, to the confusion about who the app is for, what market it's for, is entrepreneurs will try to build the full scope app they've envisioned with all the features and the functionality that they could possibly think of, all in their first version. But you have to make sure that you're getting feedback from your target market along the way. Now, if you have these down and if you have this down, then you can be sure, pretty sure, that when you create the first version of your app, if it aligns with those things, then based on your market knowledge, which you use to create these foundational pieces, you could be pretty sure that the first version you create is going to hit home with these users that you're targeting. Yes, you might have to tweak your messaging a little bit as you go. That's to be expected. That should happen, really. But you can feel more confident that you're at least starting off on the right track. So you want to make sure that your development, so the features and all the functionality that you're creating, that it aligns with these things so that you're not going too far out of scope, and so that your app and the features, you want to make sure that they all still relate to these foundational pieces that you've put in place. Okay, so make sure that the development of your first version aligns, and of course you're going to expand your app from there, but you should only do so once you're now getting feedback from those initial users. And those initial users are going to help you expand on these and narrow down and pinpoint even further. Expand on this. Okay, that's what you want to happen. All right. Now, as you start doing your user outreach, as you start doing your beta user outreach, make sure that you use each of these pieces that we've gone through here in your messaging. When you're having conversations with these people, talk about this, right? This is what you want to talk about. When you are creating your landing pages, or maybe you are making posts in forums, in social groups, on social media platforms, make sure that you talk about these things. It does no use for you if you have all of these things ironed down, but then you don't talk about them. And what I see happening very frequently is, instead of talking about any of this, entrepreneurs will instead talk about only their app's features when they're trying to bring users on board. And it makes sense. As the owner of your app, as the person who's been thinking about this potentially for years by now, you're really excited about the features. That's what kind of lights you up, right? But remember that, when we come back to looking at this right here, our problem and our outcome, your app is just the thing that helps with the transformation. Most people are going to care about the problem they're having, and they're going to care about the outcome that they're wanting. They may care about the features to a certain extent, right? Especially if they do have an existing solution and they have experience with existing features already. But first and foremost, they're going to care about the problem and the outcome. So you have to be able to talk about all of this. If you can't talk about all of this, then hold off on talking about your app's features until you can. Okay. That's really, really important. All right. I hope you found that helpful. Again, make sure that you go through this on your own, spend some time with it, right? Come up with some hard hitting messaging, be able to clearly, confidently talk about your app, get people nodding their heads yes, get people asking you for more information. That's where the other stuff can come in. That's when you can start talking about features and expanding more. And you are going to set yourself up for so much more success if you do. All right, again, thanks so much for watching. And if you are just starting out with your app, or if you haven't started yet, but you want to make sure that you're headed forward in the right direction, we have a free training where we walk through some strategy for making sure you're building the right things at the right time and in the right order, which is a lot easier said than done. We talk about some different technical components when it comes to no code apps, and we really just make sure that you're going forward in the most strategic way possible. So if you want to join in on that, you can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop and sign up. It's completely free. All right, again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.